Hello, Facebook fans and YouTube fans of DX Engineering. It's Thursday afternoon here in the Eastern Time Zone of the USA. It's 18:30 Zulu on August 11th, 2022. And this is the Manufacturer Showcase. At DX Engineering, we supply equipment that is manufactured all over the world from over 160 different manufacturers. And we are very proud to represent every one of them. And we hope that we have what you want. And if we don't have what you want, let us know. Send us an email, dxengineering@dxengineering.com, and we'll do our best to bring it on. But today is a little different. Our special guest is Doug, November 4 Hotel, November Hotel. Doug has a very popular YouTube channel where he talks about the operation of radios. And lots of different radios and under lots of different operating conditions. Welcome, Doug. How are you?
Good, Tim. Thanks. Great to be with you.
Yeah, it's good to have you here. Doug, I know, we've spent a lot of time on these shows talking about various radios from the various Yaesu radios, some of the VHF ones, ICOM radios. And one of the radios that has really made a big splash in the marketplace. And, I was looking on the DX Engineering website, so much of a splash. The FTdx10 from Yaesu has 77 reviews and all but one. So 76 out of the 77 has got 5 stars. And so, Doug, I think that tells you something.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm surprised about the one, to be honest. But, you can't please everybody, can you?
Doug, let me know when you see my screen, and we'll get right into it with you because you know this radio really well. And this is a hybrid SDR. You got it?
Yeah, I can see it now. And I want to compliment your website is the absolute best. Whoever is behind that, kudos to them, because you have all the information there. You have the reviews. You don't even have to log in to read them. And then you also have access to the manuals. I just think your website's fabulous.
Well, thank you very much, Doug. We're very proud of the website, and we do work very hard at it to make it as easy as possible for customers and viewers to get the information. But, these, like I said, I guess there's one 2-star review. I'm sorry. There were a few more. It's got 4.9, but Doug, this is still awfully strong.
Well, I tell my viewers, there is no perfect radio out there. There really isn't. Some of them will be very close to perfect, and a little nip and a tuck here and there, maybe a firmware update, would put it to perfect. So you can't please everyone. Right.
And so, Doug, let's get into the radio itself here a little bit and see if we can get some of your reactions about the controls and how everything works and what you find is really special about the FTdx10.
Well, it's compact, and I like to characterize it, in a generic sense as half of an FTdx10D. I mean, you don't have 2 antenna ports, you don't have 2 individual receivers, and you don't have the VC tune preselector. But other than that, essentially, you've got a half of an FTdx101D, which, those of you who follow the Sherwood list for receiver performance, he has the FTdx101D listed at number 1 at 110 decibels. And this one is at 107. So it's quite a contender. I think the receiver is just so good at reaching down. So let me preface what I look for in a radio. And what I had to compare it to was my FTdx 5000 MP, which is still my favorite radio. Why did I buy the 5000? Because I like to chase QRP stations that are 2,000, 2,200 miles away from me. And I live in an antenna limited situation, so all I have is wire. And so I needed the ultimate radio to make up for a limited antenna system. And honestly, I actually tested all the big radios before I even chose my transceivers. And the receiver, and particularly also the noise reduction capabilities of the FTdx10 just floored me. It's just so good. It can reach down and grab a signal that, and I've literally been on the air with a friend of mine 2 miles away. We chase together a lot, and he'll say, "You're talking to a ghost station." I said, "No, I just worked that guy." Well, I don't even hear him. So just the fabulous receiver. Now, if I may, I will admit that when you compact an FTdx1010D, again, just in generic, kind of a generic way I say it, down into something this small, you are going to give up a little bit in ergonomics. So you'll notice, thank you, that's a great shot right there to look at. So you'll notice, you know, you've got the big VFO in the middle, and then you've got the four knobs on the four corners there, and then a couple of those have well, three of them have an outer ring. Yep, there you go. So because of the compactness of the radio, you do have to understand that you're not going to have as many features accessible via a knob. But fortunately, the ones that you mostly would ever use are available. And then pressing that function knob brings up one menu, and everything else that you might need to get to is under that function menu. Yeah, there, that right there, that serves, you press it in, it brings up your function menu, you rotate it, and it will affect change to whatever the last thing you had selected from the function menu was. So if you had power selected, then that function knob will automatically do power. If you had CW speed, which is one of my favorites, because I'll catch myself sometime going back to somebody on CW, and the last person I worked was at 22 words per minute, and now I'm answering somebody who's sitting at about 15. Well, I can just quickly reach up and grab that knob and pull it back down in speed. So I tend to keep CW there assigned to that knob. So again, you know, even though you have limited ergonomics, the things that are the most important are accessible. They've made accessible via the buttons that surround the VFO. And, you know, some people complain about it's a little bit difficult to press some of those buttons around the VFO without touching the VFO. And that can be true sometimes. I quite honestly, I don't know how I've done it. I guess it's just one of those things with practice, you get perfect, right? I've gotten to where I can do it and I don't touch the VFO. But that's the beauty of that little lock button down at the lower right. You get on a frequency, you press the lock, and then you can play all around that VFO. There you go. And you don't worry about, you know, having anything else that you hit causing the VFO to move off frequency. And then that outer dial, the MPVD, they call it. Yeah, that one is really convenient because I keep that one assigned. See, I noticed it up here in the display. If you look right below the 000 in 14195, there it says level. So that's indicating that right now the function knob is assigned to control the level. Now, what that level is the sensitivity of the scope, the band scope. And so I tend to set mine. There's a button down there called C.S. You see that one down there, to just immediately to the left of the big VFO knob. There you go, custom switch, C.S. So you can long press that, and it'll bring up over in this display and a list of choices that you have for what you would like to automatically be controlled with that outer dial. So I actually assign my outer dial to be level. And then, like I mentioned before, I then let my function knob control CW speed if I'm doing CW, or I might have it assigned to do RF power if I'm, you know, and I'll tell you why I would do that. Most people are going to say, well, just turn it all the way to the right and run 100 watts. And that's true. But when you're running an amplifier, you may have, I'm running a solid state amp, and I'll always have to be mindful when I go, say, from 60 meters, well, where I will run 100 watts. But then I switch over to 20 meters, and I've got to remember to roll that down to maybe 18 or 20 watts. So I will tend to use that function knob for either RF power or CW speed. So therefore, the outer dial becomes a very convenient way to adjust that level. Now, why do I want to be able to adjust that level on the fly? Because what you're seeing in the scope, And right now it's that particular image is showing that the scope is set to 3D spectrum scope. And but this radio, you press that little that blue text that says 3DSS, and it will become a traditional waterfall like most people are accustomed to. I have to admit, going into this, I was not a real big scope watcher or waterfall guy anyway. A spectrum scope, yes, but that was about all I needed. I just wanted to see little blips that told me there's a signal. And so I first played with the 3D a little bit because that was simply the way it came out of the box. And then after a while, I switched it over to waterfall mode. But I have gradually found myself liking the 3D better. And I'll give you a little instance of why. You see all the signal spikes there, but in between you see all those little things. Almost looks like if you can change the color scheme on that, and actually have mine set to, yeah, where you're pointing there. I have mine set to where that's green, so it's like grass. And what I try to do with that scope is I adjust that level dial on whatever band I'm on to where I get rid of the grass, and therefore what I'm left with are signal spikes. And it's really neat how it works its way toward the back of the screen. That's a time domain. So if you see a spike and you're trying to tune over there and the person quit transmitting, with a waterfall, you can see their signal go straight down. On this, you see it push toward the back. And because I set my level to where I essentially cut the grass and all I'm left with are signals, then it really looks nice because mine will just be black where there's no signal. So the reason it's convenient to have that outer dial is because as you change bands or you change gain structure. So for example, you see this radio is set to amp 2. That is the maximum sensitivity of the receiver. There you go, amp 2. And so I would normally never run amp 2 on 20 meter band. The idea is, and I talk about this on my channel a lot, so any of you out there who have watched the videos on my channel will absolutely know what you're predicting what I'm about to say. Work that noise floor from the front end. Don't try to push the S meter to the right. Try to force it to the left. And what I mean by that is get your gain structure right. So the idea is if I'm on 20 meters and I'm running amp 2 and I've got an S7 noise level, I have too much sensitivity. And let me put that in perspective. In the early days of amateur radio, let's just go back to maybe 1959 when Drake had a transceiver for $599. The transceivers back then didn't have the sensitivity that we enjoy today. And so we've gotten to the point now where we have too much sensitivity for some band conditions. So you want to make sure that you're working that S meter when no one is talking. You want to work that S meter toward the 0. I'm not saying you have to get to 0, but you want to get pretty close. I like to get below S1. And I'll do that by first lowering the gain. I may go from amp 2 to amp 1. And if that's not enough, I'll go to IPO, which in Yaesu speak is intercept point optimization. Other brands of radios will just say no preamp or preamp 1 or preamp 2. But Yaesu does another little trick with that. The reason they call it intercept point optimization, the intercept point is where the RF comes in off your antenna and meets what we call the first mixer. And that's going in a super heterodyne radio, which the FTdx10 is what's called a hybrid. It has both a super heterodyne front end and an SDR stage that is fed by that super heterodyne front end. That helps with selectivity. It helps prevent the overload that you may see sometimes on pure SDR radios. So it comes into that first mixer, and it's going to be the oscillator in that stage is going to beat against that signal coming in off the antenna and produce what we call our first intermediate frequency or first IF. That is the intercept point. Well, there's a little bit of amplification that goes on there, or there could be a lot. Amp 2 is a lot of amplification. Amp 1 would be less than amp 2. Those two amplifiers, by the way, are what we call cascaded. So when you turn on amp 2, you're just adding to amp 1. IPO disables both of those. And depending on the design of the radio, Yaesu's done it both ways. It may put just a little bit of amplification in there, or it may do a straight bypass. For example, on the FTdx1000, it has what's called IPO2. That's literally just taking the raw signal off the air, mixing it and pushing it right into the roofing filter. But sometimes what they'll do with IPO is they boost it just a little bit to overcome what we call insertion loss. But they only boost it to the point where it will not begin to degrade what we call the signal to noise ratio. So that IPO is a really good thing. In fact, so here's the deal. I run IPO almost all the time. I may even run it on 17 meters if I'm talking to somebody who is, strong, S9 or better. I don't need an amp 1 or an amp 2. I'll run IPO. And why? I'm so spoiled that I've got my sideband now sounding like just about as good as listening to someone on a repeater. And that's a combination of keeping that noise floor down, going over into the DSP section, and then using something like digital noise reduction, which the FTdx10 is just phenomenal at that. And then rolling that RF gain back a little bit. To me, the RF gain was the greatest invention for radio for many, many decades. You roll that back and you literally sit back, and now you might hear people say, well, when you roll the RF gain back, you lose volume. You may lose a little bit, but that also can mean you went too far. The general rule for me is if I'm talking to somebody who's an S9, I'll rotate that RF gain knob counterclockwise until the meter is reading around S8. So their signal's just overcoming that RF gain a little bit. I think of the RF gain, it's kind of a S meter squelch, just my own country boy logic there. When you do that and you've eliminated the noise or minimized it from the front end, then you employ the RF gain and you employ the digital noise reduction. You sit back and you think you're on a repeater. And so when I turn all that off and I go back to not having all of that, it just, I have to say, I'm so spoiled now, it annoys me.
Well, Doug, that is a great description of a lot of things that are going on in the FTdx10. Of course, as you know better than me, there is even more stuff going on. And so, we've only got a few minutes left. I just want to, if you would give a quick review of your YouTube channel and some of the things that people can find that you've talked about on your YouTube channel, and maybe even some upcoming events for you, Doug.
Well, sure. Yeah. Well, first of all, I am planning on going to Huntsville and hope to shoot some footage there, and that will become a video on the channel. In fact, it looks like I may even be able to meet some of my viewers. And but yeah, the channel, I mostly focus on operating techniques. What started my channel was that I was running into more and more amateur operators, especially newer people. My channel, N4HNH radio, is more targeting newer people. Or I've got many viewers who say, well, I've been a ham since 1952 or 1965, but they maybe were out of the hobby a little while and they just got back in and they're trying to learn the new gear. So what I found is that a lot of people were not fully utilizing the radio they had. Didn't matter what radio they had, and then they would go and trade it in on something new, which I'm sure is good for you, Tim. But they would trade it in on something else, sell the other radio, and then they weren't even getting everything there was to get out of that radio. So what I wanted to do with my channel was, no matter what radio you have, I can only use just the radios I have, but I'm teaching techniques that should be applicable to other brands of radios, other models, so that you can maximize what the radio already has. I mean, I've run into people who didn't really know what an RF gain was, and they come from the side of the tracks that says turn all the knobs to the right. And so I just wanted people to be able to utilize whatever radio they have. I mean, I've got an old ICOM 720 sitting over here. I can get the good out of that radio. You need to just be knowledgeable of what you have in front of you and try to maximize it before you think, well, I got to get the newest thing. Agreed. If you know that and you get the newest thing, then you stack the deck in your favor when you're doing a contest or trying to dig out the weak signal. So that's the focus of my channel. I don't just do radios, though. I do get into antennas, HTs. I'm an old Motorola HT technician, so naturally I'm going to talk about HTs on the channel. But I will say that the emphasis is primarily on HF operating techniques and primarily focused on dealing with noise. I don't know if any of you guys have noticed that, but if you've been around amateur radio for a while, you may have noticed that the noise floor has continually and gradually increased since the 1980s. Thankfully, these radios are coming out that can help deal with that. But a lot of the focus on my channel has to do with eliminating noise. I have a lot of viewers who tell me, man, I'm just about going to give up amateur radio because I can't hear. And I'm glad to report, by the way, though, that some of those guys, as a last-ditch effort, ordered an FTdx10 and I'm getting rave reviews from them saying, hey, I can enjoy radio again. And that's not saying that the FTdx10 is the only radio capable of doing that. Many of them out there are capable if you will just harness their capabilities.
Yeah, that's very true. One thing in the chat room, Doug, is the chairman of the Huntsville Hamfest is in the chat room, Mark, November 4, Bravo, Charlie, Delta. And he wants you to send your contact info to the Hamfest, the flea market chairman. And he has, there we go. He wants your contact info, so he'll get you Hamfest media credentials. So
okay, let me jot down his call sign. Looks like he says I can get him via QRZ.
Yep, November 4, Bravo, Charlie, Delta.
I like that call, binary coded decimal.
There you go. And he's a great guy. Well, listen, it's been great having you on today, Doug. We'll do it again. Maybe we'll do a different radio or maybe even an HT the next time. But super great. And thanks for all you do to give back to ham radio by making all this information available on your YouTube channel. And we certainly wish you all the best, Doug.
Yeah, thank you, Tim. And if I might add, just those of you who are getting into amateur radio, either new or you've been away a while, you couldn't have asked for a better time to get into this because the radios are better than ever from everybody. And hey, Cycle 25 is beginning to wake up, and I've been having some fun on 10 meters, 15 meters, which is one of my favorites. 6 meters, the Magic Band's been waking up too. So if you haven't gotten yourself into those bands yet, take advantage of that. And you're, like I said, you're just getting in at a great time. It
is the magical time as the sunspots continue to rise. Well, tomorrow during the weekend special, we're going to have Hal, World Traveler Hal, W8HC, and he's going to be talking about his most recent de-expedition, his IOTA activation of Kiska Island in Alaska. So Hal will be on live with us tomorrow. Make sure you stop in for that. Until then, 73 from DX Engineering.